London, August 1305. The city was alive before dawn, restless like a predator about to feed. The markets opened, the carts rolled in, vendors shouted. But everyone knew that morning wasn't about bread or wool, it was about blood. Crowds gathered with the same anticipation gamblers feel before a fight. Only this wasn't a fight. It was an execution, a performance. And the star of the show was a man whose name already sounded like thunder across the island. William Wallace. They said he was a knight, a rebel, a murderer, a patriot, depends on who you asked. But the truth didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that King Edward, the man they called Longshanks, wanted a message carved into history. And Wallace's body was the ink. This wasn't just punishment, it was theater. A show so brutal it would echo for generations, a reminder that England wasn't to be challenged. The sentence? Hanging, drawing, and quartering, the cruelest act in the Crown's dark arsenal, reserved for traitors, designed not just to kill, but to erase. Wallace was no stranger to battlefields, but this was different. There'd be no sword in his hand, no army at his back, just the crowd, the rope, and the executioner's blade. The city held its breath. The kind of silence that comes before a storm, before the sound of flesh tearing and bones breaking fills the air. This was London's theater of death. And the curtain was about to rise. Before the execution, there was the hunt. And every hunt begins with betrayal. William Wallace wasn't just a fugitive. He was a ghost Scotland couldn't bury, a thorn Edward I couldn't pull out. The nobles had already bent the knee, traded loyalty for survival. But Wallace kept moving, fighting, hiding. To the English crown, he wasn't a knight anymore. He was a disease, and diseases need to be cut out. London's files, those thick, dusty records no one reads anymore, tell us Wallace's capture didn't happen on the battlefield. It wasn't a soldier's victory. It was a traitor's payday. Somewhere near Glasgow, August 1305, Wallace was cornered. Some say it was Sir John de Menteith, a Scottish knight who'd sworn allegiance to the English. Others say it was just greed. Maybe both. History rarely tells you the truth, but it always leaves fingerprints. The bounty was heavy, the price of blood set high. Men who once toasted Wallace's name in taverns now whispered it to English agents in shadowy corners. Informants, collaborators, men who decided survival was sweeter than honor, they built the trap. And the moment Wallace was dragged in chains, the streets of Scotland knew. They knew hope had been sold, not defeated, sold. The journey south wasn't quick. It wasn't meant to be. This was psychological warfare, the kind detectives recognize when someone wants to break a suspect before the final blow. Bound, chained, paraded through English towns, Wallace became less a man and more an exhibit. Mothers pointed him out to their children. Men spat at him. Crowds jeered, some out of loyalty, others out of fear. By the time he reached London, he wasn't just a prisoner, he was a trophy. A man who had stood against the empire, now stripped of dignity, dragged through mud, waiting for the final act. But here's the part that chills the bone. Wallace never begged, never wept. Witnesses say his eyes stayed cold, distant, like he was already looking at something beyond his captors. That's the mark of a man who knows the endgame but refuses to play by their script. The Crown thought they had caged a wolf. What they didn't see was that wolves don't die quietly. They haunt. Westminster Hall, August 23, 1305. A room built for law, but that day it was nothing more than a stage. They called it a trial, but it was a masquerade. Justice dressed in Latin robes, with words Wallace barely understood. Treason, murder, sacrilege. Words stacked like bricks in a wall meant to crush him. The irony? He was accused of betraying a king he never swore loyalty to. Edward Longshanks wasn't his sovereign. To Wallace, Edward was just another invader. So when they asked for his plea, he spat the truth. I could not be a traitor, for I was never your subject. The court scribes wrote it down, cold and detached. But in that single line, Wallace signed his death warrant. Not that it mattered. His fate had been sealed long before his chains ever clinked on English soil. Edward wanted theater, not truth. Judges were handpicked, loyal to the crown, men who knew their lines and played them well. The outcome was never in doubt. The charges were tailored not to prove guilt, but to justify cruelty. Treason gave them the rope, sacrilege gave them fire, murder gave them blood. Together, they built a scaffold taller than any law. The sentence was read with ceremonial weight, like scripture. He would be drawn through the streets, hanged until nearly dead, cut open, his insides torn from him while the crowd watched, his head severed, his body divided into four. Every step had meaning, every act a symbol. The crown wasn't killing a man, they were dismantling an idea. The scribes called it justice. The people called it spectacle. Wallace? He called it what it was, a message written in flesh. That day, London didn't hear the sound of chains. It heard the sound of a gavel sealing the fate of a man who had already been tried in whispers long before he stood in that hall. The trial was finished. The man was condemned. All that remained was the executioner's hand and the crowd's hunger. August 23rd, 1305. The city woke early, restless, like an animal sensing the kill. The streets weren't filled with sermons or prayers. They were filled with vendors hawking pies and ale, with children sitting on shoulders, with men sharpening their voices for jeers. It was a carnival of cruelty. A city turned execution into entertainment. Wallace was dragged out, stripped and bound to a wooden hurdle. The horses pulled, the cobblestones tore at his flesh, and the crowd roared with approval. He wasn't being led to justice. He was being paraded like spoils of war. Every twist of the cartwheels carved humiliation deeper into his body. Londoners lined the streets, their eyes hungry. Some shouted, "Traitor," others threw refuse. To them, Wallace wasn't a man anymore. He was theater, a cautionary tale written in blood. The authorities wanted it that way. They wanted children to remember the screams, wanted merchants to tell stories of the rebel who died like an animal. At Smithfield, the stage was set. A scaffold rose above the crowd. The executioner waited, steady hands, dead eyes. This wasn't his first performance. He knew how to stretch pain into minutes, how to carve agony into memory. The rope went around Wallace's neck, not tight enough to snap it, just enough to choke. His body convulsed, face purple, chest heaving. Death brushed him, then stepped back. The crowd leaned in, and then, cut down, still alive, still conscious. That's when the knife came out. A blade made for butchery, not mercy. The executioner worked with cold precision, opening Wallace from the gut, pulling life out organ by organ. Witnesses swore they heard a sound unlike anything human, a scream that cut through marrow. The entrails were thrown into fire while he still breathed. Symbolic. Medieval England believed the bowels carried compassion. Burn them, and you burned humanity. The crowd gagged at the stench, but their eyes stayed fixed. Some cheered, some watched in silence. But no one looked away. Finally, the axe. One clean strike, merciful compared to everything before. His head lifted high, dripping red. The crowd roared, but it wasn't joy. It was something darker, a ritual completed, a message carved in steel and blood. His body was quartered like meat, each piece destined for display, nailed up in Scottish towns like road signs to obedience. His head dipped in tar, spiked on London Bridge. For years travelers would pass beneath those empty eyes, reminded of what happened when you crossed the crown. It was over. The wolf had been killed. But the howl would echo long after the blood dried on the cobblestones. The crown thought it was finished. They believed the execution had closed the book on William Wallace, leaving nothing but ashes and warnings. But history doesn't work that way. Sometimes, when you crush a man, you forge a myth. The immediate aftermath was silence. Scots bowed their heads, nobles tightened their allegiance to Edward, and fear swept across the land. Wallace's body had been scattered, head on London Bridge, limbs nailed in Scottish towns like trophies of domination. It should have ended there, But silence can be deceptive. Beneath it, something was brewing. The brutality of Wallace's death didn't erase him, it engraved him. The very cruelty Edward had orchestrated became fuel for rebellion. His plan backfired. Among those who saw it was Robert the Bruce. At the time, Bruce was no saint, an opportunist, a survivor, a man playing both sides of the board. But the sight of Wallace's dismemberment, the memory of entrails burned before a cheering crowd, lit a fuse. This wasn't just politics anymore. This was survival of a nation's soul. The lesson was carved in fire. The English crown didn't offer mercy. To fall into their hands meant humiliation beyond imagination. That knowledge hardened the Scots. Better to die in battle, sword in hand, than to suffer what Wallace endured. From that point on, the wars took a darker edge. No quarter given, no surrender accepted. Wallace's death rewrote the rules of Scottish resistance. But the impact didn't stop at Scotland's borders. Across Europe, word spread fast. Messengers, chroniclers, and traders carried the tale of the man hanged, drawn, and quartered. Other kingdoms watched, and they judged. England was strong, yes, but also cruel. Reputation mattered in medieval diplomacy, and Edward's spectacle left a stain. He wanted fear. What he got was disgust. The English records describe Wallace as a traitor, a criminal who deserved every slice of the blade. But Scottish chronicles painted a different picture. A martyr who looked death in the eye without flinching. Two narratives, one man. That's the thing about history. It isn't written in ink. It's written in perspective. And over time, perspective shifts. Wallace, the outlaw, became Wallace, the hero. The gallows couldn't contain him. The knife couldn't silence him. His scream, his silence, his defiance, they all survived, passed down in whispers, in songs, in legends. The crown had wanted to erase him. Instead, they carved his name into eternity. The executioner's blade ended a life, but it didn't end the story. London thought it had delivered the final word on William Wallace. His head rotted on a spike above the bridge. His limbs blackened on city gates across Scotland. To Edward, it was done. Case closed. A rebel erased. But history doesn't obey kings. In the decades that followed, Wallace's ghost lingered. His death became a mirror. Some saw cruelty, others courage. Generations of Scots whispered his name like a secret password. Ballads sang of him. Stories twisted, blurred, romanticized. He went from outlaw to saint, from traitor to national father. The truth was brutal. The legend was beautiful. And legends live longer than men. Even centuries later, people argue about the details. Who betrayed him? What did he say with his final breath? Did he scream or did he stay silent? History offers no clear answers. Just fragments. Just shadows. That's the detective's curse. You never get the whole picture. Only the pieces left behind, scattered like his body. But maybe that's the point. Wallace's legacy isn't about clean facts or neat endings. It's about the questions he left behind, about how far a man should go for freedom, about the price of resistance, about whether death in chains is defeat or the seed of something greater. Edward wanted a warning. Instead, he created a martyr, and martyrs have a way of outliving executioners. So, was Wallace's death the end of a rebellion or the beginning of a nation's soul? That's a case history still hasn't closed, and maybe it never will, because legends don't die. They haunt.